Well, hello there, humans, hippies, earthlings, whoever you are, wherever you are, whatever you're doing, and whoever you're lucky enough to be doing it to. I'm Bushka on Blitz, and this here is the MBT 70. That's the English equivalency of the Panzer Kampfwagen 70, or as I like to call it, Lucky Phil. And Lucky Phil has been doing an awful lot with me this afternoon on the test server. Now, the reason I'm doing this tank, and I'm not doing the Tier 7 rocket launcher, and I'm not really going to have much of a chat about the event and the competition and how you get stuff, is not because I don't care about you, the humans. It's because I'm really actually quite excited about this one right here. This is the one that piqued my interest. This is the one that made me stand up and take notice. Because, look, it's German, it's low slung, it looks incredibly modern, and its gun is absolutely light years different to anything else you're going to find on a Tier 9 heavy tank. And after so many battles, well, I mean, I've played over 40,000 games in Blitz, unique makes me stand up and pay attention. And there is nothing quite so unique as this thing running around at 9 at the moment. And it's got some terrible glaring weaknesses and some really amazing positives and bonuses that you can pick up on. Now, the first thing that needs to be said about it is its gun is very, very odd. It's running an XM150E5 gun. Now, if the XM sounds at all familiar, you'd know it from the T49, which has an XM81, which is a gun launcher. The reason that that sounds familiar is because it doesn't actually fire just a standard round. It also fires a missile. So while the caliber, for all intents and purposes, is a 150mm gun, it doesn't have the same stats that a normal 150mm gun would have, exactly like the T49. What you end up with is a gun that is quite simply unique. It has very strange numbers. 480 is your heat rounds, 560 is your APCR rounds, and 640 alpha, which is the standard alpha for an AP round on a 150mm gun, is your HE damage, which is usually somewhere around the 960 mark. On the positive side, you have 90mm of HE pen, which means beware the booties of American tanks the world over, and indeed the sides of some American tanks. And the light tanks you see at Tier 8 will be shaking in their boots when they have to deal with you. If you've got a 120mm gun in Blitz, you get 460 alpha. This is how it's always gone. If you've got a 150mm gun, you get 640 alpha, and so on and so forth. The differences in this gun is it's got the reload time of like a 150mm gun, but it doesn't have the alpha damage of a 150mm gun. And to give you a gander on what that means, you've got a slightly lower reload running your gun rammer than a Jagdpanzer E100, which has a monstrously large 170mm gun. So that can make life very difficult, because if you've not got a big reload and you don't have a true 150mm alpha, then you have a very low damage per minute number, and if you get pushed on, you can be in all sorts of strife because you don't really have much armor on the chassis. What you do have is a very low slung turret that can bounce shots and go hull down. And this is a kind of tank I think is going to be ideal in platoon with, say, a E75 or a VK4502B, tanks that can really soak up damage but want something that's mobile enough to follow them around, still get to flanks, take a little bit of a beating on the turret, and dish out much larger than expected alpha damages. Now, of course, this means you've got a peekaboom tank. A peekaboom tank, for all those that don't know what I'm talking about, is a tank that wants to trade shot for shot because its alpha is bigger than your alpha. If you're dealing with an IS-4, this is not the ideal situation to be in because you do not want to be in a situation where you are going toe-to-toe, swapping gun for gun, because you really don't have the gun for doing that. You want to be in a situation where you take a shot, you hide behind your mate in the VK4502B, and after he's fired his gun and you're completely reloaded, you come out and you have another swing at it. Because you're going to see here when I fire, there's over 15 seconds to reload to my next shell, which is a bloody long time, all right? That is a very, very long time between drinks. Now, the reason I'm not particularly drawing anything from these games is because they're against bots. But for all that, they aim center mass. And what they generally tend to do is aim at your turret. And the turret on this thing is reasonably strong and reasonably effective. I say that because I don't want to go out on a limb and just say it's really good. It feels good. It's got 200 millimeters of armor on the front, but because of the vagaries of where I live and the inability to get a test client in time to do anything spectacular with this video, I was unable to load up and play against other players in the MBT 70. And that means I didn't get a 100% absolutely positive, know exactly what the numbers are, look at this tank frontally. I'm just using a guesstimate based on my past experiences with bots on the test server. And that's also why for one of the few videos you're going to find on channel, I'm running a Mac client, because Mac was the only client I could get a hold of where I could actually get out and run this little thing. It's not little though, is it? It's actually quite large. It's low to the ground though, and I've got a very, very soft spot in my heart for tanks that can get down low and stay there, because as I've said so often before, and for anyone who's watched this channel for any great length of time, the best armor you can have is not being seen. And Russian tanks like the IS-4 and the IS-7 are past masters at actually going into small berms and depressions in the ground and hiding their entirety there. And while the Cent 701 is not a huge tank at all, we're certainly around about the same height as that tank there. So we're not tiny, but we're not over the top large, and we don't have a huge turret sticking up or a weak point on top like the T110E5 say, or the T57 or the AMX 50B. We're certainly not as big as the Mouse, but we're not as little as an Object 140. We're somewhere in the middle of that walk of life, and that's fair enough. I'm happy with that. I think that will be fine. Does not look attractive. I mean, it looks modern. It's got those two huge jet exhausts at the back that just look exciting. They look like they make you go faster. They don't, but they look like it, which is great. A lot like the flames that shoot out of Tankenstein's butt. Just because they're there doesn't mean they actually do anything. Now let's talk a little bit more about the stats of the MBT 70. Quite apart from your odd 150mm gun and the numbers that you get on it, and your 15.86 seconds reload time, you have what can best be described as middle-of-the-road gun handling. It is, again, exactly the same kind of aim time you're going to get on a Jag Panzer 100. If I had to quantify it and put it somewhere in the Tier 9 heavy tank mix, I'd say you've got a slightly better aim time than an ST1 or an E75 or an IS-8 to give you some view on that. And your dispersion is right around that of the 183 or the E100. The E100's a very, very good. I mean, it's got 7 degrees of gun depression on the E100, and you've got 6 on this. So it's not great gun depression wise, but it's better than, say, an IS-8, which has very, very poor gun depression. Right around where the AMX 5120 is on your gun depression. Speed. Well, you do have 40 kilometers an hour as a top end speed, but you don't have a huge hit point horsepower to ton ratio, which is not out of the ordinary at all for Tier 9 heavies. Very few of them do have an outstanding power to weight ratio. Your terrain resistance numbers are pretty solid, right up there with the good guys in Tier 9 heavies, and that allows you to follow and be a good platoon mate for any of these heavy tanks at Tier 9. 40 kilometers an hour, not top notch, but certainly in the upper echelon. Credit coefficient, well, it's a gift tank, so you're not going to really get smashed losing credits. You'll have a better credit coefficient than the other guys in your tier, but again, it won't be anything to write home about. But it's a Tier 9 specialty tank, and that's hard enough to find, and although I don't think it's going to be severely overpowered, I do think it's going to be effective if you know how to play and if you can put it in the right hands. It's kind of like the 183 can do well, because every once in a while it'll just burst out a big dose of alpha, and it doesn't really matter that you get hit a bunch. You got 1700 hit points. You can do something with that, and you can make the most of it. I'm looking forward to it. It's a tank that's different, and after playing 40 odd thousand games, I like different. Variety is very much the spice of life. Make sure to subscribe to the channel. Make sure to stick around. Watch out for the event itself. I'll be live streaming it. And until next time, look after your family and stay safe on the battlefield.